Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited Washington, D.C. yesterday again, met with President Trump in the White House for the second time, and this time got a bit more of a kind of what Zelensky got when he arrived. Not exactly at that level, but yeah, it was pretty astonishing how Trump, and we've said this, it's nice to hear from Trump rhetoric that is pro-Israel when we heard pro-Hamas and saw pro-Hamas policies from his predecessor, but it is Trump, and he can't be trusted. He's not principled. He can flip in a day, and he did flip. And he announced, I don't know if Netanyahu even knew this was coming, but he announced in front of the cameras next to Netanyahu that he will have direct negotiations with Iran um, this weekend. That was one of the many presents he had for Netanyahu. The reason for the visit officially was for Netanyahu to go there and kiss the ring and say Israel is gonna uh, what is it? Drop all tariffs, which is great, should be done anyway, but also what is it? Wipe out our trade deficit, which is a ridiculous thing to say. And Trump, of course, publicly makes fun of him for America giving Israel money. It really is, it's something we knew is possibly coming, but it's really scary to see it so soon. And I'm gonna start with, what I think Netanyahu could have done to prevent this. Now, this is not um, in any way to justify who Trump is, but Trump loves power. And we saw this, in the previous round where he would, his previous administration, when he, attacked the North Korean leader, and then later on, somehow he changed his mind, and he actually said, I admire him, his people admire him, or something to that effect. We see this with his policies on Russia. He really does admire Putin. He repeats his talking points. And in Netanyahu's case, and you even mentioned yesterday Erdogan favorably. In Netanyahu's case, Netanyahu doesn't have to become, the dictator that the Israeli left already accuses him of being in order to impress Trump. What I think he could have done to impress Trump was when Trump said, for example, all hell will break loose if the hostages aren't released by this Saturday. Having all hell break loose on that Saturday. If the first thing Israel had done on that Saturday when the hostages weren't released was bomb the hell out of Gaza, and let's say 10,000 people died, and then Israel put out a statement saying, this is a dress rehearsal. We're going to start for real tomorrow, or the hostages will be released tomorrow. That would have earned Trump's respect. So Netanyahu is in the unique position, I think, of any leader in the world where he can actually do good things and earn Trump's respect. But he not only refuses to do that, even in the one policy that Trump has that is a shift, a major shift from the past, and massively a massive opportunity for Israel, which is the deportation policy. Trump repeated it again, and Netanyahu repeated his contribution to it, which is it will be voluntary. Why voluntary? Why? The people on October 7th, none of what was done to them was voluntary. So yeah, Netanyahu shows his weakness, when he does things he should do, when he does things he shouldn't do. Again, even dropping the tariffs now, which is a good thing, is a sign of weakness. The timing of it. So yeah, we got what we expected, but I think we got it a bit sooner than we expected it. Welcome to the Daily Objective. I'm Razi Ginsburg. I'm joined by James Valiant. James, your thoughts on that meeting yesterday and what this means for the future, near and far?
Well, like you say, with Trump, you kind of have to do a translation. You have to, what's he saying explicitly and what does that implicitly mean? Because taking Trump at his word is not really possible. In any case, the disturbing part was, yes, he direct talks this Saturday with Iran itself, which is crossing a Rubicon for America, in effect. We were always doing it through intermediaries, but that was kind of a joke. It was all for show, right? We negotiated deals with Iran over their nuclear program, which is still going full force, which shows you how unsuccessful those indirect negotiations were. What I found paradoxically interesting is that Iran's response was, no, 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 no. Oman is the actual, we're going to be doing it through a third party. We're the ones who have a principled opposition against talking directly to the United States. Ayn Rand said something very, very important about people who are the consistent ones, who really appear to believe what they are saying. And in this case, it's Iran who, ironically, and so it's the consistent ones, whether they're on the good side or the bad side, who are going to win because they're the ones who have the moral confidence. And it's Iran saying, no, no, they're indirect negotiations that we're going to be engaged in. We won't be directly. Trump had no problem describing it as direct negotiations. Now, how paradoxical is that? Now, on the other hand, he did say that there would be something very unpleasant that would happen. And it's obvious, he used the word obvious, what our reaction would be if we don't get action from Iran. Nuclear Iran is intolerable. They cannot get nuclear weapons. So let's take what we can from this. It looks like Netanyahu and Trump will cooperate with doing something, and doing something militarily about Iran's nuclear program should these talks fail. And I don't know how long Trump will give it. It's impossible to read Trump's mind. Trump is constantly hiding the ball and confusing people on purpose. And so, because it's the art of the deal. You want to keep them off, like with the tariff stuff, you want to keep them off balance so they don't know where you're coming from. It's a negotiating tactic. Well, unfortunately, that's also a total sanctioning of evil. It's a total cave-in, as you point out. And that's what's despicable about it. Direct negotiations with the most evil regime on the planet. I thought America didn't do direct negotiations. I mean, as I say, it was just a joke before because we were negotiating with them, if indirectly. But Trump has removed even the mask of moral pretense on that. And the other thing, when it comes to Turkey, what was interesting is that Trump acknowledged what Israel was doing in Syria and said it's a bad part of the world. It's a dangerous place where you guys are. And so he didn't negatively sanction Netanyahu for any of the actions that are taking place. And so what Israel is doing in Syria and what Israel is doing in Hamas against Hamas in Gaza, he implicitly endorsed, actually. And so what do? You throw Erdogan a bone, in effect, and that's all. I think that's all that was, but it's still despicable. It's the despicable world of international negotiations today, and Trump is particularly amoral and unprincipled when it comes to that. Now, the other disgusting thing, if I just could add one more thing, he indicated that negotiation over dead bodies was a valid thing. So I guess for religious reasons or whatever. I mean, I heard yesterday, I caught the whole press conference in the White House with Netanyahu and Trump. And Trump seems to think that negotiating for dead bodies is a good idea. Now, that I find absolutely despicable and disgusting, with all sympathy for the families. And I understand why they want the remains of their loved ones home. But you cannot give a centimeter. You cannot blink an eye for that kind of thing. But I mean, I don't think you should negotiate for living hostages in this case. You're setting up more hostage taking. But to explicitly and morally include dead bodies as a valid bargaining chip, I found totally disturbing. But we
Well,
have to look at these things in comparison.
yeah. I mean,
You know what I mean? Um,
I agree with you on that, but that is Israel's policy as well. Israel does negotiate for bodies and is happy seemingly to release murderers for in some cases the bodies of maybe not the people they murdered, but other people who were killed by terrorists. You said something like, I don't know how long Trump is going to give the negotiation with Iran. Well, I know how long Netanyahu has given it so far. It's nearly 30 years that Netanyahu, this is his issue as prime minister and as a concerned citizen, which is what he called himself when he quit politics, when he thought he wouldn't become prime minister and then came back later. And this is his issue. And I think he'd give it until we see a mushroom cloud above Tel Aviv. And that's the thing. I don't trust Netanyahu to do this, and um I think there would be more of a chance of him uh, doing the right thing if it means going against a Biden than against a Trump. And in a sense, understandably, because Trump could say, okay, this is a betrayal. We're now gonna give all the weapons we give to Israel. We're gonna give them to Hamas. I mean, that's not with Trump. You never actually know. That's the thing. Now with the Syria attacks. I don't count that as either here or there because I don't think even Biden condemned them. It's very difficult to say something about Israel bombing stockpiles of weapons that are left there and nobody knows who's gonna take them. But the fact is, Turkey is trying to make Syria, one of their countries, basically a country owned by Turkey, and which means Turkey will, in effect, have a border with Israel. Now, the guy that Trump chose to praise to the world, I think for the first time, certainly in those terms, uh, has said about the guy who was sitting next to Trump when he was saying those words of praise, has called him Hitler and all sorts of things, and has said that Israel is worse than the Nazis. And again, he is, if you look at state sponsors of terrorism and generally at threats to peace in the Middle East, Iran is obviously first. I think a close second, Qatar and Turkey might be tied. And Trump seems to be a big fan of Turkey. His right-hand man, Witkoff, big fan of Qatar. Things are not looking good, people. Again, especially
You need
considering.
a moral lens. And that's exactly what Trump is particularly missing. There's no moral filter saying what Turkey is doing is wrong. We're going to kick them out of NATO. It's going to affect our relationships with Turkey, what Turkey is doing. And how many times does Turkey have to behave like, and they're becoming more and more and more and more like a savage monster, just like all the other Islamic countries in the region. And is there any kind of moral judgment there against Turkey? No. But as I say, on the other hand, I do think there is a difference with Biden. Biden shackled Israel against any activity in the north, really. And it is good to see that at least there wasn't, well, we have to bring even, the activity in Syria down a notch. Trump did not. It's what Trump did not say. Let me put it that way. And it's weird, like you say, you can't trust what Trump says. So you sort of have to read the tea leaves. Do your best interpretation of what is actually being said. And when it comes to people leaving Gaza, I mean, voluntarily, okay, you heard what I've said previously on this program. Forced relocations of people have had a very negative history. On the other hand, the people in Gaza have, the complaint has been, hey, they're trapped. Even Egypt won't let them out. So if there are countries willing to take them, that's the more interesting part. And let people leave, the whole Palestinian population if it wants to leave Gaza. The other thing that Trump said was, why the hell did you guys give Gaza to the Palestinians 17 years ago? He didn't like that. He didn't think it made any sense. And he criticized the entire move, which again, if you read the tea leaves and try and understand, try and backwards interpret what's being said here, is that seems to be an implicit moral sanctioning for an occupation. I can see it no other way. When Trump puts it like that, it was a big mistake. I know you weren't there, BB, when it happened, but that was an error. I don't know why you guys did it. That seems to be an implied endorsement of Israeli occupation of Gaza. Again, something I'm not sure we would have gotten from a Biden or a Harris. They would have opposed occupation by Israel of any lands that had been given up for peace, even though, as Trump pointed out, it has spectacularly failed. I mean, from the moment Hamas took over, they've been lobbing rockets at Israel for the last 16, 17 years now, almost continuously. And so it was a giant failure to give Gaza over to Hamas, as Trump points out. And I'm glad he pointed it out. And I'm glad they're, even though it's voluntary, what's that? Obviously, what you have to do is kill or remove any suspected people who are active in the quest to kill all Jews. Whether it's voluntary or not is not the essence, but a way of getting Palestinians out and finding countries that will take them. That may be, as I say, another good sign in conjunction with the implied sanction of an Israeli occupation of Gaza. That's the
Yeah,
best I can do, Razi.
just to help Trump a little with the history. So, yeah, it was Ariel Sharon, the prime minister, who um, ran in the election. Basically, the main issue in that election, 2003, I believe, was the left's idea that Gaza should be, it shouldn't be in a peace
Land
deal.
for
It should be
peace, remember?
it should be a withdrawal. And Sharon was against it. And then he was elected, and then that became the main thing that he was going to do in his time in office, but he was going to do it after a referendum. And then he thought, you know what? I'm going to do a referendum, but only of the Likud party members. But he said on stage, whatever happens in this referendum is what we're going to do. He lost, and he went ahead with a plan anyway. Netanyahu
Anyway,
said, I'm against this plan. I will vote against it in the Knesset, the Israeli parliament. Sharon said, if you vote against it, you will be fired. He was foreign minister, I believe, at the time, foreign or finance minister. And so he doesn't vote, and then they call out his name again. He and a couple of others walk back into the Knesset and vote for the disengagement plan. Netanyahu voted for it. Now, when it actually happened, he eventually resigned. So, Netanyahu has as much spine as he always had, which is none whatsoever. And yeah, I wouldn't give him credit for not having done what he wouldn't have done it because it's too ballsy a move, bad or good. There are moves that are too ballsy for Netanyahu to make.
and if
Um,
we're complaining about forced relocations of Palestinians, what about the forced relocation of Israelis who had settled in Gaza? That is what took place, ladies and gentlemen, over 17 years ago now. That's
yeah,
what took place.
Yeah, and I just want to also point out because there was a talk of who will own Gaza, and of course for Trump, that's clearly the United States of America. That is something that cannot happen because it's great if Trump, thinks he can, make Gaza kind of like America, but as soon as a AOC becomes president, uh, this will become a Palestinian state armed by America. So no. No, that's not a good idea.
No, it is not a good idea. I absolutely agree with that. What we need is an Israeli occupation of Gaza. And I'm just going to say that. The people there have demonstrated now for the better part of 2 decades that they're unfit to govern themselves. All they do is aggressive attacks on Israel. They've been, like I say, they've been lobbing rockets since the moment Hamas took power, in effect. And then the climax was October 7th. So Hamas must be utterly destroyed, and Israel must occupy Gaza. And at least we got an implied sanction for that from Mr. Trump. You should never have left Gaza. And as I say, that was a forced relocation of many Israelis, by the way. No one complained about that forced relocation. But, and as I say, there seemed to have been, again, you got to read between the lines with Trump because it's like you have to put on your psychic hat or be some kind of the amazing Kreskin or something to figure out what he's saying. But he implicitly said, what you're doing in Syria is okay with me. It was unmistakably implied, let me put it that way, because he did not bring down any kind of critical hammer on other activities. And he said further, let's try and count our blessings where we can. He also said that the attacks on the Houthis are not going to stop. We are still at the beginning phase of the destruction of the Houthis, and that was a very good thing to say. But direct negotiations with Iran, and well, I guess it's taking the pretense away from the negotiating with them through intermediaries anyway. But it does reveal something, as I say, morally speaking, when Iran are the ones saying, well, we wouldn't have direct talks with America. It's got to be through a third party, which kind of tells you who's got I hate to use even this word in the context of Iran, the moral confidence, the certainty of their position. And it is the consistent ones who generally win. So if he really is going to negotiate, I hope that Trump does not mean to negotiate in good faith with people who you cannot negotiate with in good faith, should never consider negotiating with, should never recognize, much less have direct talks with. Well, we should get on with the destruction of Iran's nuclear program.
Well,
immediately, as of yesterday.
well,
Uh,
that's
so
that's another thing about these direct negotiations where America will give something in exchange for Iran not building a nuclear weapon with which they would, carry out their slogan of death to Israel, death to America. It's the goal isn't just not a nuclear Iran. It's the Iranian regime needs to go. It's an oppressive regime of its own people. It's a regime that sponsors terrorism more than any other in the world. That they do, conventionally. They don't need a
this is
nuke
a
to do
point.
that.
This is a point we need to make to all sides, both parties, in both of our countries. There's this reluctance to destroy the Islamic Republic of Iran is widespread. We are unique in our position that there should have been regime change 40 years ago, 30 years ago, but no, here we are, and we still have Iran, and the consequences of that have been most horrific. October 7th, not to mention missile barrages sent directly from Iran against Israel. Now, if that in itself, if that kind of aggressive attack on Israel, just for defending itself, is not a cause for taking out the regime in Tehran, I don't know what would slap these people across the face to realize that the very existence of the Ayatollah and the mullahs and the control in Tehran is intolerable. Intolerable to Israel, intolerable to Western civilization, intolerable to America. And we have seen it. And if October 7th doesn't get it through, if those two giant missile barrages straight from Iran doesn't get it through to our thick skulls, I'm not sure what will get through to them. But both parties in my country are reluctant to take out, talk about regime change. That's the term of art. They don't want regime change in Iran. Why? They oppress their own people. When a woman doesn't wear the hijab properly, she disappears in a prison and dies. The women and girls of Iran, if hundreds of them start protesting, what happens to them? They disappear into a prison in Iran. So we're talking about one of the most brutal regimes, maybe the most brutal regime on the planet, and why it's off limits and radioactive to talk about regime change is beyond me. But it's across nations and it's across parties. We
Yeah.
alone seem to be the only ones calling for it.
And you would think, you would hope that somebody with an election slogan, "Make America Great Again," like as if he understands what made America great, would understand that what Iran is the opposite of what made America great. And it's a country that if it wasn't a threat to everybody and just oppressed its own people, a country you should pretend doesn't exist and not negotiate with them at all
They're
about anything and
aggressive.
not trade with them.
You
Uh,
know, there are many dictatorships and authoritarian countries in this world, but Iran is a very aggressive one. They have been killing Americans and Israelis through their proxies for how long now? For how long now? For 40 years. It was more than 40 years ago that this new group called Hezbollah killed hundreds of U.S. Marines. They've been funding all these groups that attacked Israel and were responsible for October 7th. As I say, when are we going to get it through our thick skulls that the very existence of that regime is intolerable to America and Israel, not just their nuclear program? The most we can hope for, unfortunately, in the political context that crosses nations and crosses political parties, I'm sad to say, even in my country, is that we don't. No one is talking about regime change. The most we can hope for is the destruction of their nuclear weapons program, and they better get off the stick and do it rather than negotiate with Iran. Because guess what? They've been playing us for fools and going forward with this program. Whatever Obama negotiated with them, they cannot be trusted. We've seen them do deals on this before, and that they've lied to us and played us for fools, for years now on that very point. So why Trump would even go through the exercise of what he calls direct negotiations with Iran is simply despicable. It's disgusting. You know what they're going to do. They're going to play him for a fool insofar as he accepts it. So all we can do is hold our breath, hope that he catches on sooner rather than later, and that obvious thing that he talks about that would happen if the negotiations didn't succeed happens as soon as possible. Now, as I say, that is a crumb that we're getting, and it's better than what I think we would have gotten from Harris, at least in this one instance. So,
Yeah. I think even this is not that bad. But look, we're you know we're this is not what we would like to see. And to just to correct you, it's not that nobody's talking about regime change. Chuck Schumer and Biden talked about regime change in Israel. That's
yeah.
that's the regime change they want to see in the Middle East. the one country where people actually voted for the people
Yeah, the
in.
one place where there are individual rights, there is some sort of freedom of speech and freedom of religion. The ideas that made countries great like America that you don't see in Iran. Exactly. It's
So
disgusting.
I see that there was a discussion in the chat. Paul says it would be great to have Inat Vils. Yeah, she is one of the people we are hoping at some point to get on the channel. I see that Deborah doesn't like her. You know, we can disagree. I'm not going to have somebody on who is pro-Palestinian, but I can have, we can talk to people who are maybe mistaken but good. And there's another thing that I saw from yesterday's photo op press conference, whatever it's called, that when Trump was, you mentioned how it's very difficult to know what he's saying. And I remember in the first term, people were saying, "Oh, he's playing 4D chess," and that's, probably not true, but also he's not as stupid as he sometimes sounds. He's nowhere near as stupid as he sometimes sounds. And I hear him saying things like, I talked to the hostages and I asked them, did Hamas show you any love? And I'm like, I'm listening to that. Are you really such an asshole that you asked them, did they show you any love? I mean, yeah, this was not, any policy statement, but it was a statement on Trump, the person. I thought that he would uh, say it that way, and yeah.
It's his moral lens that's defective. It really is. The man had, I mean, think of the indecency of saying that. Oh, while I was being enslaved and kept in a cubby hole, they threw me some food. What? I mean, I see some of them that have come out, they've looked like they've been starved and beaten. And we know we've heard some of the stories, but I mean, my God, man, do you have any sense of morality? Any sense of decency? Did they how did show you some love? How did they? Oh, okay. The idea, and it's this bizarre idea that everyone is a good, I don't know, altruist under the skin, and all you have to do is, treat them with respect, and they too will act like civilized human beings because all humans somehow have this moral instinct of goodness, which is, of course, okay, they equate with altruism, and universal kindness and benevolence. No, there's evil in this world. They were keeping these hostages alive as bargaining chips when they kept them alive, and not all of them were kept alive. And some of them who were kept alive were tortured and starved. And enslaved, even when they kept them fed and alive just for the purpose of being bargaining chips. So it's precisely his moral lens that's absent or defective here. And when he asks a question like that, that is truly the most disturbing thing, because that's the moral lens with which he's going to bring to the table with these direct negotiations with the most despicable regime on the planet.
Yeah, the hostages were um, tortured, beaten, and worse. And there will be an episode at some point about some of what we heard from the hostages that have been released. But that's a difficult episode to do, and we'll
Yeah,
do it at some point. Thank you, Thomas, for becoming a member of the YouTube channel. Thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat. Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat, and thank you, Jonathan, for another super chat. The good part of what I think is the best part of what Trump has brought so far is the deportation plan. Today's episode was scheduled to be about that and the fact that tens of thousands of people have already left Gaza and the deportation is basically taking place. Israel has set up all sorts of apparatus, and it's happening. Again, it might not happen, it might not be everybody, but it's happening. And unless Trump wants to interrupt our news schedule again, that will be the topic of tomorrow's Daily Objective. Make sure you tune in to that. The reality show follows. The topic is Israel's war on itself and feeding its enemies. Thanks, James. Thanks, everybody, for watching. The reality show starts soon.
be safe.